Sound test for JDMC Wednesday morning. Sound test, 1, 2.
I don't see that in the telephone. No, I understand.
Want some water?
it's quite a different perspective.
Members, good morning, and our developers here. Thank you all for coming. I have to tell you, we will be, for various technical reasons, following a meeting here last night, we will be a few minutes late, and I think we'll probably start at 10 past, so my apologies for that.
Yeah.
None of it, but nobody knows it all.
Like that.
Whatever the next one is,
Yeah.
if that's okay. For the, so again, at the moment I have my diary blocked out for all JDMC because that's before I knew I was Pacific. So the one in August, those.
Yeah.
But I wasn't
and then
that day in the
yeah.
evening. So
Mine is. Expenses.
I could.
It goes like that. That works. Ten wonder.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Peter Fane. I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you to the Joint Development Management Committee meeting. I should say that again because we've just changed our name. The Joint Development Management Committee meeting taking place today on 10 a.m. Wednesday, 16th of July. Before we start, I will just ask members to do a roll call. I am aware of apologies from Councillor Thornborough, and if you know of any more, please say as we go along under agenda item 1. So if I read out my name, if you would just confirm for the record that you are present for Cambridge City Council. Councillor Smith.
Present. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bagent? No. Councillor Flaubert?
Present.
Councillor Porra?
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
Present.
And I believe you're attending as alternate for Councillor Thornborough, right?
That's right.
And there are others from Cambridge City here, Cambridge City councillors, as observers. I believe Councillor Smart will be joining online and will not be taking part in item 4. So for South Cambridge District Council, Councillors Bradnam.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Khan.
Present, Chair.
Myself. Yes, I'm present. Councillor Hawkins.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Stobart.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
And Councillor Williams.
Present, Chair.
So the officers permanently at the table for this meeting are, and I won't ask them to introduce themselves further, Strategic Sites and Major Infrastructure Delivery Manager Philippa Kelly, Legal Advisor Keith Barber, Committee Manager Claire Tunnicliffe, and James Gallard is here as producer this morning. So, a quick housekeeping item. Please can all present in the chamber remind themselves that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, may be broadcast at some point. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. For those participating in the meeting via Microsoft Teams, use the chat column or the raised hand option. Please do not use the chat column for any other purpose during this meeting. So moving on to agenda item 2. Before we get to that, please could councillors advise if they have any declarations of interest and identify which agenda item their declaration refers to. I see none. Thank you. I should explain that I am using my... I'm sorry, Councillor Stobart.
Chair, my apologies. I was looking. I'd like to declare an interest because I'm a member of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign, but you did refer to an agenda item, and I believe item 4 contains some notes on cycling provision, so therefore it's item 4.
Thank you. I shouldn't presume, but I have a feeling that if Councillor Bajent were here, he might have made a similar declaration. That'll be a matter for him. Before we move to the items on the agenda, I should explain that I've used my discretion as chair to move item 3, that is the item on the reform of planning committees and technical consultation, down the agenda due to public interest. So we'll come to that after the 2 pre-application briefings. So we now move to item 4, the first of the 2 developer pre-application briefings. A reminder, members are encouraged to ask questions to seek clarification of the developers' presentations, but strongly advise, should refrain from making any statements that could be interpreted as bias or influencing forthcoming planning applications. So members may want to ensure that they make no comment or offer no opinion that would preclude them from sitting on the committee when the application is brought forward in due course. I would also like to reiterate to those ward councillors present who do not sit on this committee and to members of the public that our rules do not permit you to participate in the question and answer sessions after each briefing, but you will, of course, have the opportunity when each application comes to the committee for consideration in due course. So, agenda item 4. This is in relation to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, 1 Francis Crick Avenue, and the applicant is AstraZeneca. Please can the developers introduce themselves and their colleagues assisting with the presentation. I should say you have 20 minutes to present your proposals, and once the presentation is finished, councillors will then have up to 25 minutes to ask questions. I do have certain discretion to extend that if necessary, but I shall be reluctant to use that. Councillor Bradnam, before we start, forgive me.
Thank you.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. We've got item 3 on the agenda, which is reform of the Planning Committee technical consultation.
We have indeed.
Did you want to do that
Item
first?
4.
Oh, no, item 3.
No, item 4. I
Have you
explained
changed the
earlier that
order?
I used my discretion as chair to move item 3 to the end of our business today.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry,
Is
I just
that-
didn't hear that. Thank you.
Is that controversial? No. Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. Councillor Hawkins.
Yes,
wish
it is
to-
controversial.
Fair enough. I'm happy to take controversial decisions. So we move to our developer presentation. Developers, would you kindly introduce yourselves and you then have your 20 minutes to present.
Thank you kindly and good morning. Thank you very much for your time. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Richard Surma. I am Head of Estates for AstraZeneca's R&D sites in the UK. And with me I have Guy and Jude in the front row here representing parts of our design team who will have speaking parts today. And then behind me, Jamie and Ed, who will support any questions that might come from later on.
Welcome and thank you for the introductions. Please begin.
Thank you again. So I won't spend too much time. We're going to hand over to a few people in due course. Jude will be running the slides, and a note on the slides. You will have been sent a pack last week, which differs somewhat to the slides that you'll see today. The pack of information that you've got has more text in it and more context for your background and general perusal. Today, we've tried to minimize the amount of small text that we'll be squinting out on screens and focus on images and our voiceover to bring the presentation to life. I won't take too much time, 2 or 3 minutes, but I wanted to give you all insight as to the business need for this proposal and to offer some insight into what's driving us to bring forward this proposal now. 3 key factors that I'd like to share with you. So one, and I'd like to emphasise this one really is about us bringing all of our Cambridge-based colleagues now to a single campus at the CBC. As you might be aware, we've been present in Cambridge across a number of facilities for 10 years or so, and we've been slowly migrating towards the CBC over time. We still have a contingent of people in central Cambridge in leased facilities, and our overall business objective from 10 years ago or so, when we decided to move from the northwest of England down to Cambridge to be co-located with the university and other key collaborators, was to bring all of our people onto a single campus. And it is this facility that concludes that vision. I guess the second key point I'd like to make is that we have now been present on the CBC with our new global headquarters and our UK R&D hub at the DISC for just over 18 months, with about 12 months of that fully occupied. So 2,280 people now working from the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. And as a consequence of that year's worth of working together, collaborating together as a community, we've learnt many things about the facilities that we do have and our needs for future facilities. And as a consequence, we have a sort of business need now, not only to support office growth to consolidate our community onto a single site, but to respond to areas that we've perhaps not had the greatest facilities in terms of larger meeting spaces, spaces to collaborate more effectively with our science partners on the campus. And so this proposal would bring forward that mixed-use environment. So an auditorium-type conference facility, and Jude will spend a little bit of time with you talking you through that, to look at ways that we collaborate more effectively across our own community, but also enable the scientific paradigm of collaboration across the campus more broadly. And then the office contingent we talked about. And then again, thirdly, and my final thought before I hand over to Guy, is just to note that our master plan for the last 10 years or so, which I'm sure you're familiar with, has seen a building mass on the master plan in this location for this type of facility for the last 10 years or so. What we've been holding back on is the exact user requirements for that space. So what you will see in our presentation is what you should expect to see. So our master plan for the last 10 years has had a massing in this location of this approximate size in this location for the last 10 years. We've just not had the specific use case to bring forward. And it's that we'll bring forward now. So, summarise then, key driver for us, getting all of our colleagues onto the campus in one campus altogether, and that allows us to dispense with our lease facilities in central Cambridge. Secondly, to learn lessons and bring forward future capability that we don't have currently or we don't have enough of. And then third, just to develop out that master plan that we set our sights on 10 years ago. I'm going to hand over to Guy, who's going to further the context, but I'll be here to ask questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. It's just 3 quick slides for me just to place it in a planning context. So the site for the building which I described is within the area of the original phase 1 of the CBC Biomedical Campus, which was first granted outline planning consent in 2009. Along with its parameter plans with a snapshot of them on screen there that have guided and controlled the delivery of phase 1 across those topics. Now that consent, that 2009 consent expired in 2021, which I'll come back to. Since 2009, there is a different context. Phase 1, large parts of it now already built out. Phase 2, consented and is currently being built out. Phase 3 is allocated to the south of phase 4, phase 3, and phase 4 is the emerging allocation in your emerging and joint local plan.
Just to be clear, because of the scale, and looking at that, they may not be able to see the key which shows which
I can do. Jude, if you start, so it runs north to south. So phase 1 there is the large green. That essentially is the original 2009 planning consent area. And phase 2 is the land that sits underneath Dame Mary Archway, the yellow rectangle. You'll see the cranes and development on there now. Then to the south of that is the allocation within the South Cambridgeshire District Local Plan for what is generally called phase 3. No planning consent on there yet, but is allocated. And phase 4 then is the bigger red land that is coming forward as the idea in your emerging joint local plan. Thank you. The adopted and emerging policy position is one that supports appropriate development at the biomedical campus, along with the direction given by the recently adopted SPD for the campus, which we very much note. And because that 2009 consent has expired, the proposals today will in time form a full plan application rather than a reserved matters application, as you would have become accustomed to on the campus. And whilst such a new application is no longer technically bound by those 2009 parameter plans I showed, we're nevertheless guided by them and what they always foresaw for this part of CBC.
Thank you, Guy. So my name is Jude Harris. I'm from Jessica Miles Architects, and we're working on the project in very close collaboration with Herzog and de Meuron, who are the Swiss-based architects who are responsible for the DISC building, which you'll be familiar with, which has recently received a national accolade of an RBA National Award. So Thomas Ladd from Herzog and de Meuron sent his apologies today, so I've been asked to kind of present their proposals in his place. So what you see here is a kind of an aerial view of the master plan that Richard described as being kind of intended for what is called the South Campus. The North Campus is the DISC building. The South Campus is the buildings located to this western side of Francis Crick Avenue, between Francis Crick Avenue and the railway line into Cambridge. And what you see in this picture is the building in the foreground, labelled number 3, is what we call the RFB buildings, the Rosalind Franklin building. It came forward as part of a reserved matters application, and it was entitled the Enabling Building. The Hub building, which is AstraZeneca's kind of public facing facility that has catering facilities that are publicly accessible and other facilities to support AstraZeneca staff, is located here as number 1. The Sustainable Travel Hub, which contains a substantial number of cycle parking spaces and car parking provision for all of the 4,000 AstraZeneca staff, is located on the south side of the South Campus. And the Energy and Data Centre here is number 5, which supports both the South Campus buildings, but also obviously the DISC building with energy and data services across the campus. And the key point is that this master plan contains this central green area. It's called the Promenade within the master plan, and it has perimeter buildings around it. There's very much an intention to provide active ground floor space. A number of restaurants are located at the ground floor level to really encourage that activity and engagement with both the site, but also with Francis Crick Avenue to the east of the site. And with Herzog and de Meuron's involvement, there is very much a clear architectural identity, a language between all of the buildings that have been developed so far, and indeed those buildings that we intend to come forward with. And the site that we're looking at today is the one outlined in red, so it's labelled number 6. That is the proposed site for the new conference centre and office building. And the early master plan proposals envisaged this primarily as an office building, and so this is a view of what was intended for this site as part of the original master plan all that time ago. And then in the future, there are also some additional plots. There are 2 additional plots labelled number 7, one to the south of the application plot here, and one on the western side of the promenade, so the other side of the landscaping between the amenity hub and the energy centre. And those will be brought forward by AstraZeneca at a later date. They're not a part of the application that we're coming forward with at the moment, but they're very much in our sights, and consideration is being given to those.
I'm conscious of your time. Can I just clarify, on this diagram that you're showing us, you're looking south, and the bit in the foreground with the lake pond in it, is that where the railway station is currently planned? Okay,
exactly.
Just,
So because of the age of the master plan, this was before the railway station came forward. So indeed, that was landscaped area that has now become the forecourt to Cambridge South Central Station. Okay. So that's a little bit about the master plan and its history. In terms of looking at the site specifically, so it's the rectangle labelled 6 here. So the forecourt to the station that you just referred to is located here. The DISC building is here. The LMB building you'll be familiar with is here. Royal Papworth Hospital is number 9 here. The Heart and Lung Institute was recently completed on the eastern side of Francis Crick Avenue, and we are on the opposite side of Francis Crick Avenue to that. Number 3 is the building that is currently under construction on the site. That's the Rosalind Franklin building. And the central promenade area is this green strip in the middle, which we've described. So the vehicular access onto the site is very much in this southeastern corner, and then this is the sustainable travel hub that we've talked about. So that's the kind of the site in terms of its location and context. We're obviously considering all of the kind of various access routes around the site. You'll be familiar with the busway, which goes over towards Trumpton Park and Ride. Francis Crick Avenue is subject to the CSET proposals, which are being developed and will come forward as part of a future application. And AstraZeneca have been in close dialogue with CSET to make sure that the requirements of this South Campus are not compromised by that. And then the vehicular movement around the biomedical campus you will be familiar with, and obviously providing appropriate facilities for cyclists in terms of routes through and adjacent to the site, but in particular cycle storage on the site itself. And then deliveries will arrive via the western car parking area, so people come into the site at the southeastern port. They come south of the Sustainable Travel Hub, and we have a small amount of surface parking on this western edge, and then we have a delivery facility to the west of the RFP building, which is a centralised logistics hub for AstraZeneca, and they then manage deliveries and distribution of deliveries across the site via sustainable means using electric vehicles and other means. So that's the site access itself. And then just some of the kind of landscape and public realm. You've heard me talk about Francis Crick Avenue, very much an avenue of trees to the east of our site, and some distant views across the biomedical campus. To the west of the site, we have the principal railway line into central Cambridge, and the progressing of the structure of the station is very much evident now. Within the site itself, we have this 25-metre north-south strip, which we call the promenade. And then focusing in particularly on our building plots, it obviously has to have active frontage to the east towards Francis Crick Avenue, but we very much see the kind of the focus of the building and the entrances being on the western side of the building, looking into the promenade landscaping, and the landscape area to the south of our building, which is a strategic gap that is provided as part of the original master plan strategy. So that's the landscape and public realm aspects. So that's the site itself. Turning now to the process that we have been through responding to AstraZeneca's brief. So as Richard's talked about, there's very much been identified a need for conferencing and meeting facilities on the campus to enable that collaboration both with AstraZeneca staff internally, but also with the wider scientific community, both on the biomedical campus within Cambridge itself, and indeed nationally and internationally. And the key part of the brief was the identified requirement for an auditorium for up to 450 people. There are actually very few facilities within Cambridge that provide facilities at that level. The university has 2 large lecture theatres of that size, one at the Ray Dolby Centre, where we were the architects, and one at the Babbage in central Cambridge. So this will be, one of 3 very large kind of lecture facilities provided within Cambridge. And the work that we did with the Herzog de Meuron was very much about responding to the brief, which is primarily a workplace building for 730 AstraZeneca staff, but with an additional function of providing this conferencing space for up to 650 visitors to the AstraZeneca campus. And an auditorium is a big volume, and so we looked at, do you put it in the ground, do you put it on the bottom, do you put it in the middle of the building, or do you put it on the top of the building? And we very much settled on the option that we're going to present to you today, with the auditorium located at the top of the building as a penthouse on top of the workplace floors.
Mr. Harris, just briefly, I said you had 20 minutes, but I appreciate that's going to be very tight given the amount of detail. And if it suits you to slow down the presentation and take a little bit longer, then I'm happy to use my chair's discretion to do that.
If you're happy with that, that'd be very much appreciated, Chair. Thank you. So in terms of the site massing, I mean, I've described that, that the plot is about 75 metres in length. It's about 25 metres in width. We're obviously providing the main entrances at ground floor. The primary frontage and the access into the building will be from the west via the promenade landscaping. You then come into the building and we have 2 primary functions. So there'll be one vertical core to enable conference visitors to get to the upper floors, and one vertical floor that is dedicated to AstraZeneca staff to enable them to access the workplace floors. You then have the workplace zone, which is shaded in blue here. And then on top of the building, you have this magnificent large auditorium for 450 people, which is very much a kind of jewel at the top of the building. And then adjacent to that we have what we call pre-function space, which will include breakout areas, opportunities to have poster sessions to display scientific papers, and also kind of large meeting rooms that enable kind of slightly smaller presentation spaces than the big auditorium itself. You'll see from the visuals that we present later on, we're proposing garden terraces, both at the first floor and the upper floors, which provide an element of external space to the building, both for the people that work in it, but also for the conference visitors. And finally, the heights of the building, as you'll see as we present the scheme later on, are very much kind of in tune with the adjacent massing of the master plan that was intended, both in terms of the RFP building, which is progressing for construction, but also the developing areas. So this gives a flavour of that massing. It highlights on the right, this kind of very much giving this kind of frontage to the east of Francis Crick Avenue, but the massing is very much in kind of complementing the massing on the campus, both as constructed, but also as intended. You heard me talk about these two future buildings, the one here, which is currently on the site of a temporary multi-use games area, and one here between the amenity hub and the energy centre itself. I think we've kind of touched on site access and circulation. We obviously have to provide for all means of transport, but deliveries will arrive in the northwest of the site here and be serviced via kind of electric vehicles to the building itself. We are assessing the implications of potential coach drop-off, although primarily this is a facility for AstraZeneca staff. There are occasions when people may be coming from outside and coach transport may be something that we need to accommodate. And obviously we're making appropriate provision for cycle and car parking as required for the numbers of people that work in the building, but also the numbers of people that will visit the building. Sustainability, as you would expect, is a kind of major part of both AstraZeneca's agenda, but also the kind of the design that we will be developing, responding both to the local authorities' kind of local plan requirements and the more kind of global and indeed international kind of climate emergency priorities that we're all looking at. So in terms of certifications, we are obviously going to achieve BREEAM Excellent. We're actually looking at a pathway to BREEAM Outstanding at the moment, and the pre-assessments are looking good there. We are considering embodied carbon as part of the design. We are looking at some timber structures as part of the developing structural strategy, and we'll be doing a whole life carbon costing exercise as part of the design. We obviously want to consider operational carbon as well. AstraZeneca do have their own energy centre that uses sustainable means of energy, but we are looking to minimise the operational energy used in the building, and we'll be doing TM54 calculations to make sure that that happens. Considering climate resilience in terms of kind of future climate predictions and responding to the urban heat island. Health and wellbeing is a key priority for AstraZeneca in terms of its 4,000 staff that will ultimately be on the campus. Biodiversity will be integrated into the landscape strategy. And we're very aware of the specific kind of water efficiency and strategies and requirements for the Cambridge area. We'll be complying with the BREEAM WATO 1 credits that is required by the local authority and looking to see if we can improve water efficiency even further than that. And obviously the selection of materials will have consideration of all of these sustainable priorities and embodied energy requirements. So this is a kind of a three-dimensional view of the building. I think what we're saying is that it's very contextual in terms of its massing. The shoulder line aligns with the RFB building. We are trying to promote this active ground floor frontage. We have daylight and views to all four facades, which gives us a very kind of open and airy building. There is a clear demarcation of accommodation between this open and public ground floor, 3 floors of workplace accommodation for the AstraZeneca staff, and the kind of semi-public area of the conference facility on top of the building. And it will be a very high-quality conference centre. So, this is the proposal. These are the images that have been prepared so far. We are at very early stages. We're at the beginning of RIBA Stage 1. We'll be looking to come forward with a planning application around about November, so there's still some development to be had here. But this is where the design is currently sitting at the moment. So you'll see the view from the east, from Francis Crick Avenue, almost as though you're standing at the Heart and Lung Institute, looking back into the site. You'll see that the base of the building is very much the workplace, and the aesthetic and the architectural language of that has borrowed from the RFB building, so it looks like it's part of the same language of the promenade and the South Campus. And then this very special element, this jewel, as it were, with the auditorium on top of the building and the kind of support accommodation surrounding it, is located as this penthouse on top of this kind of office space that has been created. And the planting that you see is starting to show that the benefits of these planted terraces, which you will see in some of these visuals later on. So this is a view from within that landscape strip, the promenade at the centre of the site, looking back towards our site. So again, you can see the very open ground floor, the 3 floors of office accommodation above, and then the penthouse conference facility on top of the building with terraces looking down into the promenade area and over the strategic gap. And then finally, a view from the top of the building. This is actually from the south side, so this is very much the kind of spill-out terrace from the conference accommodation. It will give views both back to the disc and indeed distant views back into historic Cambridge, which is very much a kind of a benefit that we're keen to take advantage of on this site. And the biomedical campus is quite kind of low level. There are very limited kind of roofscape opportunities to consider the countryside and city of Cambridge around the site. And then this is a view almost from the south of the promenade. You can see the amenity hub building on the left-hand side there. You can see the future building that will come, which is labelled number 7 there. You can see our building as was intended in the master plan on the right, labelled number 6. And again, a future building that will come, number 7, on the right-hand side of that. And so this is a bird's eye view, so you can see that in the context. LMB here, the DISC, so, circa 2,000 employers working in the DISC building, but it's very much a connection between the two campuses. This is the North Campus, and this is the South Campus, and AstraZeneca staff will be moving between the two campuses. But this conference facility will obviously be a unique facility on the campus, used by staff from within AstraZeneca at the biomedical campus, within AstraZeneca nationally and internationally, and other scientific collaborators. So, to summarise, this is very much a continuation of the master plan, as you've heard Richard and Guy describe. We're keen to implement the intended landscape strategy for the full promenade and indeed the landscaping and street and public realm to Francis Crick Avenue, and as RFB develops the interface with the station to the north. We very much are responding to Francis Crick Avenue as a primary kind of route within the biomedical campus. We are considering those through views and landscapes and connectivity, both from within the biomedical campus, but also from the wider landscape around Cambridge, and we're doing some townscape studies to explore that further. And this is very much a layout that is intended to optimise the potential for this conference facility as a unique facility for AstraZeneca, a very valuable facility for the biomedical campus and the other occupants on the biomedical campus, but also for the scientific community within Cambridge, within the UK, and indeed internationally. And so it is, as you've heard Richard talking about addressing the needs that AstraZeneca have identified for a building of this type, and they will need to consider very carefully the kind of access and security strategy they employ for the building, and we will develop our proposals for that further and explain those further as part of the application process. So I'm not sure how I did for time, but thank you for the grace, Chair, very much appreciated.
Considering the interruptions you had, you were exactly on time.
Oh,
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
If, Mr. Summer, you want to just add anything to round it off, very happy for you to now do so.
It's very difficult to conclude that, actually, but thank you for the opportunity. I think that was well-rounded. Thank you, Jude. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much indeed. A very helpful presentation. Now, I am sure you won't be surprised that members will have a number of questions. If members would like to just indicate if they'll have questions, and I'll try and note down the right order. Members, I may not have noticed in which order you raised your hands, but I'm sure you will tolerate it if I get you in the wrong order. I'm going to start with Councillor Anna Brennan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both of you for the presentation we've had. That's really helpful. I have 5 questions, Chair. I'll let you decide how you want me to take them. But
well, before you start, perhaps we could take 2 of them at a time. So.
Okay, so the first is obviously with your conference facility, obviously you're hoping to attract a lot of people to the site because of the auditorium, and I just wondered what measures you'll take to enable that they understand how to travel to the site because of the issues there with access to the site. And I also wanted to know about disability access and parking. I know you've got your travel hub, but can you explain where disabled access and cycle parking will be? I'll stop there for the time being.
Thank you very much for the questions. So let me take the first question, and I think perhaps Duke can respond to the second question around accessibility. So I think there's 2 parts of that to the question, if I may. So one, actually our primary use case for the auditorium is for AZ staff locally, who will be working on the campus already. So as a consequence of that co-location, all of our Cambridge-based colleagues will be already present working at the CBC. So the majority of use does not require any additional travel or any additional travel considerations than those we already represent for our staff who will work from the campus. And I think it's probably worth saying that at this point in time, we envisage 60 to 70% of the use cases being entirely for AZ internal use only. Obviously, as it comes to our international colleagues, as a global organisation, we have travel policies and travel procedures and ways of communicating that internally, which you'd expect. And arguably, the constraints and or benefits that are offered by each of our global campuses are known and supported through those communication channels. I guess the second part, and I think the part that is where we will be doing more detailed work in, is obviously as we start attracting those wider symposiums, we will bring other people to the campus who currently don't work there. And I think that is really about making sure that we stand true to our sustainable travel policies, encouraging people to use public transport. With the train station coming, that will enable greater links to the likes of Stansted for international travellers, also to things like hotel networks and so on, also present at Stansted. So we are considering these things as it relates to increased traffic to the campus. And mostly it's about staying true to our travel policies, which are around encouraging sustainable modes of transport, a lack of reliance on single-use car journeys and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think so. My response to the first question is really about saying focused on our AZ staff where we've got control, and then where we are bringing external partners into SIA will be about communicating the public networks and the public environment that are for use. And I guess, Jude, do you want to take up the second question?
I'm happy to. I mean, I think just to summarise as well, I think it's key to understand that the master plan always envisaged that the full 4,000 staff complement of AstraZeneca would come to this campus, and the provisions that have been made as part of the master plan strategy for sustainable transport are very much now being kind of utilised, as it were. So we are continuing that theme that was established, over 10 years ago. In terms of the specifics of, this building, and which will be the basis of the application, there will obviously be accessible parking, so that is available to the west of the site on the surface parking. There's up to, I think it's 35 surface car parking spaces there, and a number of those will be designated accessible bays, and so they're within the 50-metre kind of proximity that you need for an accessible parking space to the entrance of the building. AstraZeneca currently has in excess of 1,000 cycle parking spaces, and we will be assessing whether we need to increase that as part of this building. But we have good utilisation statistics on how well they're being used and what we think will be needed for this building. So we're very much providing appropriate cycle parking facilities. And then, as Richard said, the car parking facilities are managed through AZ's own sustainable transport kind of policies, as it were. In terms of the wider accessibility of the building itself, we're working very closely with David Bonnet Associates, who actually worked on the DIS building as the inclusive design consultants, making sure that the building will be fully accessible to members of the public, to people working in the building, and indeed visitors visiting the conference facility. And that's considering both kind of physical access requirements, but also considering for the people that work in the building some of the wider kind of accessibility issues associated with visual impairment, to do with neurodiversity, and other aspects like that we'll be considering as part of the design of the building itself.
Can I come
Thank
back?
you. Councillor Bradley, before you ask your next, I suggest your next three questions together, can we just bear in mind that we have used up a fifth of our time available? There are a number of other members who want to ask questions, so if we could please keep questions and possibly
And
answers fairly brief.
short,
Thank
please. We're just asking so that you are aware that we are concerned about these things. On the second one, my concern was about will there be disabled parking close enough to the building? Because I'm looking at your imagery on 04 about site access, and of course the building has its back towards Francis Crick Avenue, and what will you do about navigation to the site? Because that is where the bus stop is, so I just want you to be mindful that you will have to provide signage to indicate how people get into the building, because it's a long way to, people are walking or on active travel by definition on this site, so navigation needs to be straightforward and clear. The second one is the building itself is stepped back at its higher levels, but you've proposed a rather large roof over the terrace, which counteracts the effect of the stepping back. It makes that roof look actually bigger than the building itself. And I just wondered, have you given some thought to the reduction of the massing appearance of that? And also the movements between the disc building and this building. How will you make sure that people can navigate easily between them?
Just quickly on the massing point, we are currently in discussions with officers on that very point, and they've raised some kind of similar concerns about the massing. I think what I would say is that we are trying to be deferential to RFB. RFB will definitely be the more prominent building in terms of height and mass on this site, but this building is different and unique, and I think it will take on a different kind of prominence. But I think the points made about the roof line and where that sits in relation to other buildings is very much part of our active discussions with officers at the moment. So we'll certainly take those points on board, and the other points about kind of accessibility and wayfinding are well noted.
Thank you very much. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
And just to be clear, the RFB is the Rosemary Franklin building next door, yes? Thank you.
I think it may be known to the planning committee as the enabling building. That helps confuse me.
Further questions? I think I next have, I'm going to switch between South Cambs and City Councillors. Councillor Porrer.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. I have some comments and questions. First one, obviously, being water. You know, there's huge pressure. There's huge concerns from residents. So it's great to hear you're aiming for outstanding and the highest watch credits, but I know your previous building, which I think came in just as I was elected, was very impressive for going ahead of target. And I would really hope when this comes forward, the water is a big focus. You know, reuse, flushing your toilets, because it's not lab use, so I'm assuming you can use grey water. And obviously suds. I think what I'm missing at the moment from this presentation is what the view would be from Hobson's Park of your lecture theatre and that roof. I agree with Councillor Bradnam. I think that is something coming forward we'd obviously expect consultee comments on, but I just slight concern at the moment that it might be prominent. Might not be a problem to be prominent, but it would be nice to see. I just wonder about community benefit. So, you know, you're building a large lecture theatre, you're inviting people in. I suppose that's just a marker that I don't know how that might impact on the local community, but obviously we are keen to build links between the really fast developing areas around there and, you know, the CBC. So be grateful if you could consider that. I notice it's very glazed. It's unusual climate-wise now to see a lot of glazing, because I think we have quite large concerns. I'm sure Councillor Thornborough would be saying if she were here. So I suppose it would be useful to have more information on that. And like Councillor Bradnam, the wooden roof, I appreciate these are kind of initial sketches. It's quite abrupt. You know, it reminds me a bit of the Welsh Senedd, you know, with the beautiful carving coming up. But that's very curved and sort of dynamic. I share Councillor Bradnam's concern that at the stage at the moment, I'm just interested in terms of the design and something to reflect on, I think, because it's good to provide shade, but it also needs to fit with everything else around there is round, as you've said. So I think those are my points. I don't think they necessarily require a response, Chair. It was more just to flag issues that I think would be useful when it comes forward. Thank you.
Very welcome to respond if you want to, but otherwise we'll move to the next question.
Only with appreciation for the comments. Thank you very much.
Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. And I should say, you know, the presentation was detailed and well done, and you know, provides a good basis for comment and question. I'm just going to, because the two previous questioners, councillor colleagues have commented on the roof, but I think the roof is a lovely piece of style. And if I was to compare it with other architectural styles, and bear in mind I'm stepping completely outside of my remit here, but if you look at, for example, Chinese-style roofs, I think which would have started in the Song Dynasty, they are big and sweeping. And in fact, the prairie style that was very common, or became common across the United States, you know, from early 20th century, also has the big roofs. And of course, bear in mind, these are keeping buildings cool in pre-air conditioning. Yeah, okay, I'll hurry up. Sorry, that was just an aside. So just on transport, which is where my question was going to be. Since the site was first conceived, Cambridge South has appeared, and now we have East-West Rail in prospect. And so my first question, what is the improving rail access, and it's hugely improving rail access, having on the assumptions made about modes of travel? And secondly, and this is on cycling, if one was to imagine cycling from West Cambridge to this site, you have to approach over the railway bridge, turn right and turn right across two quite busy traffic streams. And I wondered if the team had any thoughts on how to make that cycle access easier, because one of the things we need to do to encourage cycling is to make access easier. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
So again, thank you very much for the questions and for your comments on the roof, and everybody's comments on the roof. I will turn to Jamie for the second part of your question to come in. But the first part around the impact of the Cambridge South station, we are starting to model what that impact is. So we are surveying our community in August, actually, to be able to sort of have a better understanding, a more immediate understanding of what the impact of the increasing public infrastructure will be in terms of people working on the campus. The challenge we've had, obviously, and potentially sort of opening up a different conversation, but we haven't yet had clarity on the train line and their stopping program. So, in some cases, trying to get to the bottom of what the question we're asking our community to be able is difficult. So, but we perceive that to be able to conclude our conversation in August, get a survey out to our community and start reflecting on that detail. In the end, I think it's genuinely positive that actually we will have more of our community using public transport. As I said, our policy is not to prioritise vehicular traffic to the site at all, and to prioritise multimodal travel using the infrastructure that's available. And as the infrastructure grows, then we will simply prioritise more use of that infrastructure. So I see it being positive. The exact nature of it, we need to wait until we've done our survey of our community. Jamie, do you want to pick up the other bit?
Yeah, sure. Good morning. I'm Jamie Ward. I'm a senior transport planner at Ramboll. Yeah, that's certainly something in terms of the wider cycling connections across Cambridge to CBC. We'll be considering that as part of the assessment we do for the planning application. As Guy mentioned, this will be coming forward as a full planning application, so it will include a full assessment of the wider connectivity in Cambridge, and of course we're aware of the life science partners located in the north and west of Cambridge as well, who we would hope would be cycling if they're coming to use the auditorium, for example. So yes, we'll be considering that for sure.
Now, before we proceed to other questions, I just want to check where we've got to. I'm very sorry to say that I'm not allowed to ask local members who are not here as members of the committee to take part in this session, which is frustrating, but that's how we are. But I do have down Councillor Khan wanted to ask a question, and Councillor Stobart, Councillor Smith, I've got Councillor Stobart already, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood. Any others? No. I'll go to Councillor Khan then.
Thank you. I would agree with Councillor Stobart. I like the design. I immediately looked at it and I thought, I was worried, we're going to have another bland building. And no, it's a pleasant design.
We should be careful not to be expressing our preferences. We are just simply asking questions of clarification, aren't we?
Just a comment, because of the comments the other way, I was going to say that it gives an impression. I'm not saying that I wouldn't like another design. Okay, so but the point I was going to ask is about the glazing and the air conditioning. Obviously, you've seen this summer, for instance, there is now going to be much greater need for air conditioning in buildings with climate change, and you've got a very large glazed building, including a very large glazed bit on the top, and I can imagine what that would be like in summer. I'm wondering how the demand for air conditioning actually uses a lot more energy than heating. On standard air conditioning techniques, there are techniques which are more efficient, for instance, using ground source heat pumps, because you're basically using the cool of the ground. I wondered what you're thinking of doing, how you're planning to tackle that, because I see that as a big problem. And obviously, one of the elements is this large roof to try and limit the amount of thing, but I'm sure you'll need more. I just wonder what you've got in mind.
So just to respond briefly to the glazing point, it was well made by Councillor Porra earlier. I mean, whilst it looks like a fully glazed building, I can assure you it's not 100% transparent. So there are aspects of the glazing that, whilst they look like glazing externally, they are well insulated and preventing against solar gain and providing good thermal performance for the building internally. The building is not air conditioned per se. We're using a chilled beam system, which we're also employing within the RFB next door. So that is a familiar kind of workspace solution, which moderates temperature for users within the building itself. All of the electricity will be sourced sustainably, and indeed the air source heat pumps will be used to provide a lot of the kind of the heating and cooling energy needed for the building itself. The DISC building does actually enjoy a ground source heat pump solution, so the energy centre itself is served by a vast array of kind of boreholes within that central promenade area, which provide the heating and cooling for the DISC, and we are looking at opportunities to tap into that for this building. So we will very much be employing kind of sustainable heating and cooling solutions for the buildings, and the points about the extent of glazing I think are very well made, and we are currently working with Ramboll on the building physics side to assess the implications of how the design should be adapted to respond to the very good points that you've both made. Does that deal with both of the questions?
Thank you. Yes. And now I think Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
Well, I was going to ask heating, cooling. So I think you've answered that, but what I'd like to see is anything coming forward, a lot more detail on that. How you tie in with the energy centre that I think AstraZeneca and the biomedical site has, what you think your energy usage will be. Then on, I did say how light is the roof, and it's really how that would contribute towards cooling of the building. And then I had some questions actually on the landscaping and how robust they will be in terms of, you know, once the planting is there, it's got to be able to survive, and how you would manage that would be managed. And I have to say it's a long while since I've been on this committee, and actually been, you know, it's 9 months since I've been to Addenbrooke, so I haven't seen the site recently. And then on the conference facility, so I wondered how big in numbers bodies it would accommodate. And I did think, you know, if you're going to have, I mean, you've said 60 to 70% you think it would be local usage, but that remaining 30 to 40%, are you envisaging having international medical conferences, which could be absolutely enormous? And I do wonder whether you'll get a lot of people coming by taxi, and then we're on to the transport questions again. And I certainly would be promoting the use of the bus services. Thank you.
Just a response to say thank you for the comments, and obviously the number of them will come forward in detail, and we've had a good dialogue about them. I think I wouldn't mind just touching on the sort of non-AZ use quickly, that 30-40%. Arguably, we still are an organisation driven by a set of values, so you know we are not opening up for all comers per se. This is, you know, needs to focus on R&D, life sciences, and what the campus is about. In the end, its use can be constrained and will be constrained by its size. You know, 450 people in the auditorium, it can't take any more. And we have the ability to have about 200 more people in a conference-style open room kind of environment outside of that. So you're getting to about 700 sort of person capacity total if we're using all of it at the same time. So in the end, it will be constrained by that. The taxi point is valid. We have taxi drop-off points at the DISC already. We would potentially continue to use those and then move people over to the space. And as I said, the team are still working through the specifics of the details of how we'll circulate traffic around our site. I guess we're attempted to create an initiative that doesn't put the risk of people stopping on Francis Crick Avenue. So all of that kind of stopping and dropping will need to happen on private land so that we do not disrupt the flow of traffic on the Francis Crick Avenue, and that's really dear to us to make sure we protect that.
I think that's the unanswered bit. I mean, we talked about the energy centre, and that's very much part of our considerations to make sure that sustainable energy solutions are utilised in this building as they have been employed in the DISC, so there's kind of good learning there for the remainder of the campus. And AstraZeneca as an organisation have an Ambition Zero Carbon initiative where they're kind of monitoring their performance against science-based targets, and obviously the brief that we're given as architects is very much kind of influenced by that ambition that AstraZeneca has as a company internationally. I think the other key point you made was on the landscaping, and I think they're all extremely pertinent points. We are at quite early stages of our landscaping design, but you can see the ambition for the promenade to be a publicly accessible landscape, a resilient landscape, AstraZeneca has been operating now for 18 months, so they have a tremendous public realm at the DIS. They've learned how to manage their public environments, to manage their landscape, and that learning will be brought across to the South Campus as well to make sure that we do have a resilient and publicly accessible landscape which enhances the biomedical campus and its public realm.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think just reflecting on the comments that have been made, it was going to be very helpful to see a comprehensive transport strategy and any steps that you've taken to provide sustainable transport solutions on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus in a collaborative manner, coordinated with the other users of the site, because we've been looking for that kind of initiative for some time on this site, and it's overdue, and I think our collective opinion, I think I can speak for my colleagues on that. Let's just think of this as a phase 3 trial for clinical efficacy, and say there's actually not a drug, new chemical entity, it's a building. And your exam question, as far as I'm concerned, is summarised on slide 4, which is sustainability key considerations. Now, what we see at this committee is new developments coming through our R&D centres and so on that are performing above policy, highest environmental considerations, sustainability considerations. And that's what I think we'll be looking forward to when you come back in November and seeing how you're performing against those 8 key considerations. Your RIBA winners, your top medical company, this is going to need to reflect that corporate ambition, and we'll look forward to seeing the answers to those exam questions in due course. It's not a question, it's basically a comment. Thank you.
No need to respond to that, but if you think it would be helpful to just look at slide 4 again, I forget exactly which one that was, then perhaps we could put that up on the... Right. Yes, I'm sure those are considerations that we'll all be aware of. Thank you, members. Do any other members have questions or comments they would like to make at this stage? I'm conscious we have 2 local members here, one, sorry, just as observer, but whether there were any particular questions, further questions? No, I will then just ask a couple of questions myself. And I think to some extent we've dealt with this. Clearly there are certain issues which you will be fully aware are going to be crucial here. Water efficiency has been mentioned. Travel, and the extent to which if you have conferences of perhaps up to 700 people, inevitably quite a few of the people will be coming from off the estate, not all of them via Cambridge South Station, and of course other means of travel may be developing over the next few years. It may not be possible for all of them to come by bicycle either. So a question will arise how that is to be accommodated without causing further congestion on the site. I think that's enough from me, and I'm sure those are considerations which you've fully taken into account. Members, I think that draws this, again, no comment needed unless you want to on that. I think that draws this session to an end almost exactly on time. I'm extremely grateful, as I'm sure the committee is, to the developers for that very clear presentation. And we really appreciate the time you've taken to help us to understand what your future proposals will involve. And I'm sure you will be taking the opportunity to take into account all of the issues raised if you hadn't already done so. So thank you all extremely much for that presentation, and we draw that particular item to a close. We will take a short pause before we move to the next item, members. Members, we are now live. We'll resume this meeting of the Joint Development Management Committee. Our next pre-application presentation by developers will be online. So we come to agenda item 5, which is in relation to Cambridge South Station, the West Anglia mainline land adjacent to Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and the applicant is Network Rail. Before the developers introduce themselves and start their presentation, I would like to ask our principal planner, Mairead O'Sullivan, to provide a short introduction and background as to why this pre-application briefing has come to JDMC. And when we get started, the developers will have 20 minutes to present their proposals, and after that, councillors will have up to 25 minutes to ask questions. Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. So the purpose of the briefing this morning is to provide members with an update on the provision of a public facility on the western side of the station at Cambridge South Station. I'm going to provide a short introduction with some scene setting so members are aware of the planning context, and I will then hand over to the applicant who will talk you through the details. A very quick refresher of the location of Cambridge South. We're in Trumpington Ward, partially within Hobson's Park to the west and the Biomedical Campus to the east. And we're interested in the western side of the station today. And then briefly again, an aerial photograph just showing the footprint of the station starting to come forward, a bit out of date because the eastern side of the station is now substantially complete as well. I've also just included a bit of a timeline just as a refresher. So the application, the station was dealt with as a Transport and Works Act order that was determined in December 2022. We began discharging conditions early in 2023. And then members will recall determining the station design and cycle parking conditions in August of 2023. And this briefing will tie in with the station design condition. And then there were also the landscape condition, which members determined in March, and then the lighting condition, and in particular in relation to solar studs, which was July of last year, and then finally determined after a deferral in October. So to just start the context setting, as I say, the application was determined as a Transport and Works Act order, and during the examination, Cambridge Past, Present and Future expressed a desire for a public toilet to be provided at the station to help to compensate for some of the harm caused to Hobson's Park. The inspector in her report, as you'll see the bit I have highlighted here, strongly encourages such a facility to be provided. And also to note, the facility wasn't ever kind of referenced specifically as a public toilet, but kind of cafe and toilet facilities, the type of facilities you would expect to be provided at a station. So with the strongly encouraged wording, there was no condition included, no mechanism to require the public facility to be brought forward. Then we'll move on to the decision being made by the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State agrees with the inspector's conclusions, but again stops short of including a condition to require any public facilities to be provided. So then a refresher on the station design condition. As I say, this went to committee back in August of 2023. It's a very broad condition, including all of the details of design for the station. At that time, the details of signage were outstanding and remain outstanding. That will be a future application, and that's why this is sort of tied in today. At this stage, the applicant felt that it would be possible to provide members of the public with access to the toilets on the western side of the station, although they were behind the gate line. So, as part of the decision notice, an informative had been recommended by officers just to highlight that the station signage details were outstanding and needed to be provided, and members requested an amendment to that informative that has been included to include details to signpost users of the park to the publicly accessible toilet at the station. So the applicant will cover in detail what has gone on since this decision, but ultimately, since the operator, Greater Anglia, came on board, it's become apparent that it's not possible to provide access to these toilets. And they will go into that detail as part of their presentation. One thing that's worth noting, and this will form part of their presentation as well, is that there is a retail unit that is outside of the gate line and does have the potential to sort of meet that definition of a public facility that the inspector envisioned in her report. So just to sum up, it's very disappointing that it hasn't been possible to provide this public access to the toilets on the western side of the station. But as I've outlined, there's no mechanism requiring the provision of these facilities. And there is the potential of this retail unit to come forward, which may provide some public benefits. So I'll hand over to Elliot Stamp at Network Rail, who will go through his presentation.
Just before you hand over, I think it would be helpful to the committee this is a pre-application briefing, to consider, as far as possible, the exact nature of the application to which this relates.
Of course, sorry to not have been clearer. So in the autumn time, we are expecting an additional application to discharge the station design condition. This will deal with the outstanding signage information, that informative that I mentioned. And that is the reason for the pre-application briefing, because it is very likely that this station design condition will be before members later on in the year.
Thank you. Just before our developer joins us, Councillor Bradman.
Thank you. Question of clarification. Thank you very much, Mairead. Helpful to have that photograph up. I'm looking at in the Network Rail presentation, a thing called Proposed Alternative Public Facility. Is that envisaged on the Hobson Park side of the railway with a cafe and public toilet facility, or toilet facilities associated with the cafe? Or is it on the left-hand side of the station approach on the east side of the railway line?
Mairead, perhaps that's a matter which we could ask the developers to pick up and clarify in their presentation. So, if that's all right, Councillor Bradman. So I invite the developer team now to introduce themselves. I've already said you'll have 20 minutes. I do have discretion to extend that if necessary and justified. Please, would you introduce yourselves and give your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for allowing us to come along to this session. I'm Elliot Stamp. You may recognise me from previous committees. So I'm the Town Planning Manager for Network Rail, supporting the scheme. I'll let my colleague Sanjay introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is Sanjay Patel. I am the Network Rail sponsor for the Cambridge South Infrastructure Enhancements project that's delivering Cambridge South Station.
Thanks, Sanjay. And we're also joined today by Joe Redmond from the DFT. So, Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, Joe Redmond from the DFT. I'm the DFT client for the Cambridge South project.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me one sec. Hope everyone can see it in the room. Is it visible?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. And I'd just like to start off by saying thank you as well to Mairead for some really helpful kind of scene setting and context setting there. It allows me to go kind of straight into the detail, really, following that. Sorry, my screen's jarred a bit, but hopefully you can still see the presentation. Load up again.
Yes, we can.
There we go. So really here I can go straight into the challenges that kind of Mairead highlighted before, but obviously we're going to provide a bit more detail. So Once Cambridge South Station is fully constructed and commissioned, GA will manage the station and operate it through a lease agreement between Network Rail and GA. And following the approval of the discharge of condition 17 back in 2023 that Mairead mentioned earlier, more detailed discussions have been undertaken with GA around the proposed station lease. And through this period and through these discussions, it's become apparent that it will not be possible to provide access to the toilets behind the gate line through the station to non-travelling members of the public. A summary of these details is going to be set out over the next few slides of the reason why that isn't the case anymore. So starting off with the first one, as you know, it's quite a constrained site, Cambridge South Station. Obviously, we've got Hobson's Park and then very tight area along to the east. So that in itself means the station and the operational layout of the station is quite tight. And essentially, the two gate lines are at the entrances of each side of the station building, so the western and eastern. So they'll be on the entrance. The gate line will be there. They're not set back. This results in the toilets being positioned past the gate line on what we call the paid side of the station. So you have to kind of go through the gate to get to the toilets. And GA, as a train operator, is required to comply with the DfT's railway bylaws around station operation and management. And section 17.1 of the railway bylaws states that no person shall enter a compulsory ticket area on the railway unless they have a valid ticket with them. So that would be the other side of the gate line. And I've included an extract of that bylaw on the screen. So that's quite a clear reason why it wouldn't be possible.
Could you just go back to that extract?
Yep. Is there a specific question, or are you just reading through the extract?
Carry on, yep.
Okay, I can always come back to it if you need me to later. So essentially as well, there's the provision of public access through the gate line would pose a revenue protection issue, as the toilets are all on the paid side, as I've stated. And it would also, this would increase kind of safety and security issues potentially occurring at the station. So use of the toilets within the GA station forms part of the contract with the customer formed on the purchase of a ticket to travel. And importantly, acts as their passenger insurance when travelling on the railway network, including using paid parts of the station. So not just on actually when they're on the train, but also once they're within the paid parts of the station, it is their insurance. There are also no currently GA-operated stations which allow non-travelling members of the public to make use of station facilities which are on the paid side of the station. And if it were to be provided, it may impact the amount of staff that need to be there to assist with people making sure they exit the facility or kind of impact their use of the station. So we earlier this year, we engaged with the case officers at Greater Cambridge Shared Planning about this situation, and we've also engaged with Cambridge Past, Present and Future, as Mairead mentioned earlier. They were have been consulted on the TWAO and other parts of this discharge condition process. We also contacted the TRA, Trumpington Residents Association, because they've been heavily involved in some of the aspects of the station. The TRA explained that they didn't have any kind of concerns about the change, but the CPPF obviously expressed their disappointment with the change and asked about a possibility of something called a platform ticket provision. So unfortunately, that won't again be available at Cambridge South Station, and this slide sets out the reasons for this. So platform tickets are only sold at ticket offices, and Cambridge South Station will not have one, so therefore it's not applicable or available. The station will have ticket machines, obviously, to allow people to buy tickets, but unfortunately the ticket machines don't allow the sale of platform tickets. And again, this comes back down to revenue protection. If someone could go and just use a ticket machine to get a platform ticket, they could potentially abuse the ability to access the station for other means, and also, you know, board a train, and so it's all around revenue protection. So when platform tickets are sold at ticket offices elsewhere on the network, this is always only at the discretion of a member of staff, and typically they're not really, the intention of them is not for use of station facilities such as toilets. It's really there to help people, say if someone needs to assist a member of the family or a friend onto a train, or and they need to allow them onto the platform to allow that, but they're not traveling themselves, or if there's a rail enthusiast or group or local school groups visiting the station, not for travel but for the purposes of kind of educational purposes. That's typically when they would be purchased. And in terms of the assisting someone onto a train, Cambridge South Station will be staffed during all hours of its operation, and therefore members of staff will be available to assist people on and off the train as required. So Mairead mentioned, and I know there was a question already about the kind of the location of the retail space within the station. And yes, you're correct. It is on the western side of the station. So it's the Hobson's Park side. You can see it highlighted in red in figure 2 on the layout plan above. And just in terms of kind of what GA as a station operator, their kind of definition of a public facility when they look at their stations is anywhere that can be accessed and used by the public prior to going through the station gate line. So on the unpaid side of the station, this means any member of public can use the facilities without the need of travel. And as I've said, there is a unit on the western side which has direct entrance and exit onto Hobson's Park without the need to go through the gate line. And again, just another CGI image. Actually, Mairead's image was a bit better than mine, but hopefully you can see on the left-hand side the entrance to the proposed retail unit, and you can see it can be directly accessed via Hobson's Park. And then to the right, you've got the gate line and main entrance to the western part of the station. So just coming back to the Transport and Works Act order and the inspector's report, I know Mairead's already kind of touched on this, but as set out in the paragraph Mairead showed earlier in the presentation, the inspector isn't prescriptive about what type of public facility there should be provided at the station, and it kind of quite explains around facilities such as a cafe or toilet facility could be provided, and the inspector themselves and also the Secretary of State, when they were approving the application, did have the opportunity to set this as a requirement as a planning condition as part of the deemed planning permission. So they both had the opportunity to do that. They didn't elect to take that opportunity, and I think that's quite important. Obviously, you're aware we've got working through a lot of other conditions attached to the scheme, but this wasn't one of them. And we feel that the retail use in the location that I've shown would provide a public facility that would deliver additional benefits for users of Hobson's Park, local residents, or people visiting the hospital or coming back from visits to the hospital. And we believe this would mitigate the impact of the Cambridge South Station project in line with the Transport and Works Act order decision, and also the encouragement from the planning inspector. And just an update on the retail units itself. So GA, Annabellio Group and Transport UK all working together to attract retailers interested in leasing the unit and the space. They've been to site, measurements and information has been obtained to allow them to start marketing the unit. The leasing process will follow GA's standard tender procedure. So the final tenant isn't yet determined because it essentially hasn't been out to market just yet. So there's no final tenant determined yet. But potential tenants, obviously, it will have to go through that tender process, but they could range from a cafe, shop, news agents, a bike shop, and more. So that will all be decided as part of the lease process and the tender process. Just would like to also add that on the western elevation of the station, there'll also be a help point. You may be familiar with these kind of help points on other stations, where members of the public will be able to use to kind of contact station staff and emergency services if required. So that will be another kind of benefit. If someone was in need of emergency services, they could also use that help point. And Mairead said how this all connects. So I think she's already explained that we are looking to submit the final application to discharge condition 17 for the station signage in summer, autumn this year. So we're currently preparing the plans and the drawings. And the application will specifically be seeking, station signage design approval. And I've just included some images on the screen showing, the Cambridge South Station sign, and there will be further details on that, how it's attached to the fabric of the building. And just finally, I haven't spoken to you all for some time, I think since October, and I appreciate some of you may not have been in the area for some time, or some of you may have seen all the great progress which has been made at the station. And I was on site a few weeks ago, so I thought I'd just provide you with some live construction, or maybe a month old construction images. I know Mairead shared some of these as well on her presentation. But as you can see, the works are progressing really well. So the image on the left is, and where the orange people are walking into, is the western entrance. So that's Hobson's Park entrance, and then you come into the high ceiling with the goulam roof, and you can see the wide staircase is already in situ, just waiting the balustrade implementation. In the bottom left, you've got views from the staircase onto Hobson's Park. And in the middle, that's actually not in Hobson's Park yet. That's the replacement public open space, so the landscaping we've been doing to the south of Addenbrooke Road, and you can see it's already there establishing, and that will be an additional benefit to Hobson's Park, additional land and additional public space. And just finally, got some good images of the overbridge. And again, in the images on the right-hand side, you can see the PV on the canopy roofs, the solar panels, very kind of flush into the design, into the curving element of the canopy roof. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll keep it up in case anyone's got any specific questions to refer back to any of the slides. But yeah, happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. I have questions from Katie Porra and Councillor Katie Porra, Councillor Anna Bradnam. I'll have a couple of questions myself. Just before we get into questions, I just wondered whether your colleague Joe Redmond from the DFT wanted to comment at all, given the context of the inspector's earlier findings.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think so. The department's position is we're supportive of Network Rail and Greater Anglia's position. We did speak to our Transport and Works Act order colleagues at the time to try and clarify the point around the planning condition, and they did confirm that it's not an explicit requirement. It did just need to, there was just kind of an encouragement for some kind of public facility. I think we're confident that through provision of the retail space, that will be provided. It's a shame we couldn't get the workaround in place, but the bylaws are kind of there for a reason. So we're supportive of maintaining that consistent approach at the station.
Thank you, Chair. I am frustrated by this. I think I will try and moderate my language. I was sat on when we discharged these conditions, and the toilet was put forward as a benefit to offset the Greenbelt take. And one of the reasons I voted for the discharge conditions was because the toilet is a huge asset. You know, I'm not wishing to state the obvious, but we always knew this was operated by Greater Anglia. It's not going to be ScotRail. We always knew the ticket office wasn't there, and I remember querying it at committee and being assured that having the automatic ticket thing would make no difference, it wouldn't stop anything happening. We had an informative adder that explicitly mentioned the toilet. So nobody at that point said this wasn't possible. Also, as a very weak-bladdered member of our community who doesn't drive, I have used toilets for free across the entire country without a platform ticket, including Greater Anglia, regularly. I have been on Greater Anglia platforms to put my daughter on a train without a ticket. And I'm really unhappy that this has come back now, suddenly saying, oh, the regs say we can't do it. But the regs were there when we agreed this. You know, the inspector, I appreciate, didn't attach a condition, and we've had discussions at city planning about where an inspector doesn't make the conditions quite in the way that perhaps we would have done at committee. But I'm so disappointed by this. And I think this is a huge community benefit. I live in an area in the city centre where we have public toilets that are closed, and what happens is people do their business where they can, unfortunately in gardens, in parks. And, you know, Hobson's Park is a huge benefit to the community, as is Cambridge South. I am so proud when I go through it on the train as to how good it's looking at the moment. So don't get me wrong, I'm completely supportive of it. But I cannot understand why this has come back now. Also, even if you weren't allowing access through the gates, which you knew about at the time the condition was discharged but didn't raise as an issue, you've got a retail unit outside that will have toilet facilities. I suppose my position, if you can't let people through, which I'm failing to understand at the moment, is just make the condition of renting that unit that it has toilets that are available to the public. We have community toilet schemes all over the country. So I'm sorry I sound really negative about this, but nothing has changed about the regulations on the railway since this condition came through, when the applicant said this was possible. And Greater Anglia routinely allow people without platform tickets, to use facilities. I think here it's because you don't have enough staff. That's a different matter, but we did query that at committee, and we did say that not having a ticket office, they said, no, that's normal, the new stations are all going to be like this, it won't affect anything. So even getting a free platform ticket from the machine must be possible. So I am disappointed by this, but I also understand that there's not a condition, but I feel that I need to say that, because my decision previously to agree some of these conditions, for me, was weighted very heavily because of the community benefit of a public toilet for the people playing out on Hobson's Park. And it is most often parents, carers, women, people with children, and people with bladder issues. We had a few children being menopausal myself. We all need a public toilet. Thank you, Chair.
Elliot, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I appreciate your frustration, and you know, as you said, back in 2023 when we were discharging the main station design, we did at that time the hope was that the intention was that we could provide it through the gate line. Unfortunately, you know, after more detailed discussions, and that has taken place since then, it's become apparent, and I appreciate your comment about the bylaws were already there. So it's a lesson learned from us, but also given the context of the station, this is a Project Speed initiative, if you can remember. So we're trying to deliver the station and the improvements of the station and the benefits, you know, quicker, more efficient, better for the taxpayer in terms of costs, but also less disruption to the rail network and also disruption to Hobson's Park. And as part of that, we were doing things at pace and trying to you know, speed up certain aspects of it. And I appreciate that is something we'll take away and we learn from, you know, and this will be a lesson to learn in regards to that aspect. But unfortunately, I can't go back in time and go back to 2023. But if we did this again, we would be able to be better educated.
Before I ask Councillor Bradnam to put her question, I've been remiss in not welcoming to the committee Councillor Bob Illingworth, who's taken the place of Councillor Faubourg. My apologies. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, but I can only say I agree entirely with Councillor Porrer. The whole principle of a very large open public space. Right at the outset, we discussed the need for a public toilet and that was accessible. And I do think it's extremely unfortunate that now we are being told, you know, bylaws say you can't do that. So my feeling is that there is a degree of delegating the responsibility to the tenants of the retail space, which I think is an onerous responsibility given the number of people who are likely to want to use that toilet facility. And Councillor Porra is quite right. If we do not provide toilet facilities, people will toilet in Hobson's Park because, you know, you can't say to a child, no, sorry, there's no toilet. It's just a great disappointment. And I don't understand. I'm not going to quiz it at the moment. I wouldn't put the case officer under that pressure, but you, Elliot, have said the planning didn't take the opportunity to condition it as, or to require it as part of the planning application, which I don't understand that. So all I would say is I agree in the strongest terms with everything that Councillor Porra has said. I'd like to ask the Chair whether you would like to ask the case officer if she wishes to make a comment on that, but that's for you to decide. But the second thing is, if Elliot would go to page 6 of his presentation, which shows the retail unit, I just want to point out how very small that retail space is. It appears to have cabins for the provision of WC in the bottom left right-hand corner, but they access onto the railway station, the paid part, not to the public space, so I'm not quite sure how that's supposed to work. So that's the other thing I have a concern about, that the plan doesn't appear to accommodate the use of those as part of the public space. And I'll leave that thought with you. The second thing is, if you could just move on to the next slide, which shows the proposed alternative facility. This slide shows the proposed, the station access on the west side of the railway station. But then elsewhere, and if we go to slide 10, it shows the access on the east side. Now, for anybody travelling in Cambridge, and people come from all over the world and all over the locality to get to Addenbrooke's Hospital and this Cambridge Biomedical Campus site. And I think you will agree that the two sides of this station look quite similar. They both have a curved roof, and all I would suggest is that the signage needs to be very clear as to where people are. I know you can go through once you're inside onto the other side of the station, as you can in all railway stations, but I do think it might be helpful if the side that points west says something like west platform or west, and the east side says east, so people know where they are arriving, or maybe northbound or southbound or something, so people know where they are and can navigate easily. And I don't know what in standard railway signage might enable that, but I do think it might be helpful if people understood which side of the railway network they were approaching. Thank you.
Elliot, any further comment on that?
Yeah, so just coming back to the first point about the clarity around my kind of statement that the inspector and the Secretary of State had the opportunity to add a condition. So as part of the Transport and Works Act process, we engaged with Greater Cambridgeshire Planning to discuss potential conditions. So we worked, and there was a session within the public inquiry to agree on the conditions if the Transport and Works Act order was to be approved in the future, as it was. But also the inspector themselves have the opportunity to add to that condition list, and the Secretary of State also have the opportunity to add at their time when they're reviewing it as well. So that's what I meant. They had the opportunity, they have the power to be able to add conditions if they see fit. The second point about the toilet. So yeah, the toilets you're referring to, they are the toilets within the station on the paid side of the station. The retail unit itself as I said earlier, it will still need to go through the tender process. So we don't know the tenant who will be going in there and whether they will want to provide a toilet or not. That's still to be determined as part of that process. But the toilets, as you can see, are the toilets for the station behind the gate line.
So, if I may, for clarity then, if any tenant were to take on that red site, they would need to provide provision within that for a toilet that then the public could use.
Potentially, if they require that, like I said, the tenant specifically isn't chosen, so it's whether they, you know, as part of their offering, they believe they want to provide a toilet, they would have to provide it within the red.
And as Councillor Porrow said, do you think there's any mileage in seeking a requirement to provide a toilet?
It's a GA process, so we don't have that control. And Sanjay, come in if I say anything wrong, but we wouldn't have that to imposition that onto GA to require it to their tenant. But it's something we can strongly encourage. Sanjay, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Elliot. I don't know if we have any power to insist that a toilet is included as part of the facility that GA do lease to a tenant, but we can take that to GA and let them know the committee's feelings on this.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Thank you.
And then finally, just on the last point about the wayfinding within the station for helping people to go out the correct side of the station. We submitted a wayfinding strategy as part of condition 29, which was the landscaping condition last year, and that set out that there would be information to help direct people out of the station to the appropriate area they want to see, whether it's they want to go out west to Hobson's Park and Trumpington, or whether they wanted to go east to Addenbrooke's, the hospitals, or to the biomedical campus. So that is provided within the wayfinding strategy.
Me, that's not quite what I meant. All of that would be necessary, but what I was saying is when people approach either of these station buildings, they just say Cambridge South on both sides, and I'm saying it should say Cambridge South, whatever you choose, west or Cambridge South East.
I'm sure that's something that can be taken into account before this comes to the next stage, which is specifically the signage. Which is why I was asking. Now, I have further questions also from Councillor Richard Williams, Councillor Stobart, and I think Councillor Porrow or Councillor Illingworth and Councillor Smith would also like to ask questions. We're about 13 minutes, halfway through our question session, so perhaps we could all bear that in mind. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to say, I agree with what's been said before. It's unacceptable for assurances to be made, for those assurances to be a material consideration in the planning committee's decision, and then people to come along and say, I can't do that now. It makes a mockery of the whole planning system. One question I did have, though, and I will be brief, is this whole problem is because of the location of the barriers, and the barriers are right in front of the door. There are many, many stations in this country where the barriers are not right in front of the door. They're much further into the station. So why can't we just move the barriers? I was in Tottenham Hale the other day, huge area before the barriers. Why can't we just move the barriers? So that a little bit of the retail units on the top side of that diagram could be in front of the barriers. Simple solution.
Elliot, is that a simpler solution as
Unfortunately, it's not. So the station, although we've got a double heighted ceiling, so when you enter the either entrance, it gets a real good sense of space. Unfortunately, the site is very constrained and very restricted, and if you can see from the floor plan, there's not much space in between that and the extra large staircase and lifts provided, and all the back of house units. So unfortunately, at this station, that is not an easy solution, unfortunately.
Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Williams probably stole my thunder there. But what we have in the red marked area and the two toilets that are tantalisingly integrated into that block is a space with drainage, with water, with everything we need to provide a facility. And maybe it's a provocative kind of thing to say, but couldn't this whole area be turned over to one of those lovely, like French Railways managed toilets? You know, dispense with the coffee. You know, let's just go for, you know, a toilet block which is beautiful and attractive, and people might be prepared to pay money for it. Sorry, maybe a little extreme, but that is within the physical possibilities that the site presents.
Elliot.
Again, I suppose we can mention it to G as part of their tender process. So if there may be companies out there who see that as a good idea, but again, it all fits in, would have to fit in with the GA tender process and their kind of regulations around that. But we can pass on the comments.
Councillor Bob Illingworth.
So we can't see the whole of the ground floor, especially on the right-hand side. And I just wonder, I'm having to guess now what might be there and whether or not the toilets can't be rearranged, although it would appear from what we've seen that this building is almost complete. So trying to redesign that bit of floor area before you walk into the atrium, what I'm calling the atrium of the station, that is before the ticket gates. I can't tell whether that could be rearranged or rebuilt, I suppose. The other question, which is on the same topic, to do with the retail. I mean, if it's in a retail shop or whatever, that's only going to be open probably from 9 till 5. That's a bit short. If people want to use a toilet before or after those times. And I think it is totally unacceptable if you cannot force a tenant to provide toilets. I mean, the first tenant might provide the toilets. They decide they're going to move somewhere else. Another tenant comes in and says, oh, no, I'm not going to provide that facility. I also want to ask about parking, but shall we finish the toilet issue off before I do that?
Illingworth, I don't think parking is an issue we can take up today. It's not part of this application or this presentation, if that's all right.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Bradnam, and then I'm going to come to Councillor Martin Cowan.
Thank you. Can I just reiterate what Councillor Williams has said? All it would mean was changing the ticket barrier northern connection, if you like, from where it is now to the back of the building that is to the right of the retail unit. It would just mean making it diagonal instead of, you know, why on earth that can't be done, I don't know.
Elliot, I'm conscious that you've already responded to a lot of these points, and I'm sure you're listening carefully to the concerns. I will say something in a while about the relationship of this to the application when it comes through in due course. But I think it may not be possible to give an answer to each of these points separately. Councillor Martin Cowan.
Rather similar, but a bit different. I presume that you have there's two cubicles, and I presume one is male and one is female, which is now a controversial issue, but there we are, that's all right. I wondered whether he considered doing two unisex toilets and slightly realigning the ticket barrier so it goes between the two toilets, one outside, one inside. Because I think you do need to have one inside, which is because obviously if somebody's gone through the barrier, they can't go out again to the toilet. And that will give one toilet on either side and solve the problem and very minuscule reduction in the area of public space where the barrier is. I think it probably could be solved with a little bit of ingenuity. That's just my comment.
Another one there, Elliot, for a comment, unless you particularly want to respond to that. We're coming to the end towards the end of our time for questions. Elliot, did you want to respond to that point before I ask you a question myself?
Yeah, I think kind of responded earlier around the complexities of it, and also, you know, just to remind, you know, the design and the layout of the station has gone under significant amount of work, ped flow analysis around making sure we can get people into the station, out of the station safely, and also to be able to manage the network, make sure they get on their trains they want to get on their trains to, and also in case of any kind of emergency that can be done in the best way possible. So you know, it is very complicated to alter any gate line at this stage, and as we said before, we're under you know, we've carried out significant construction works already, so unfortunately I don't think that will be possible.
Thank you. Then, as to my own question, it is presumably still possible that the retail unit or whatever, being currently negotiated by Greater Anglia, might be, for instance, a cafe. I can see that for people approaching the station from the west, either they will have or be intending to buy a ticket, in which case they'll be able to use all the facilities, or if they do not have a ticket, they're more likely to be interested in the use of toilets than in retail facilities. They probably won't have walked across Hobson's Park in order to access retail facilities outside the station. I think that as far as this committee is concerned, it may be naive, but we would hope that, having noted the concerns of members, that it will be possible in the next 6 months or so to give, or 3 months or so, to give very careful consideration to whether there might be some way of accommodating those concerns, bearing in mind that to some extent this comes from local members based on consultation with those in the immediate area. And we are conscious of the fact that Greater Anglia's relationship with government and with DFT may be changing slightly in the next few months, and that perhaps this might enable fresh thinking to be brought to bear, no doubt on bigger issues than this. All I can say is that when it comes to the actual application, we appreciate this will be for signage. So we are not expecting that we will be able to take this particular issue into account in that to a great extent. On the question of signage, Councillor Bradner makes some very important points about helping people to locate themselves within the site. I'm sure that other councillors have, like me, frequently got lost on the site. I tend to regard a visit somewhere on the site as an opportunity to explore rather than an opportunity to find the place I'm trying to get to. And no doubt the signage at the station will be able to help with that. And lastly, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Porra said earlier on, that we are, I think, as a committee, extremely proud of what is happening with Cambridge South, of the progress that has been made, and of the design overall. And it would be a great shame if this particular concern were to sully that reaction to the station and to all the work that you have done. You're very welcome to comment on that. I don't propose to come back to members again on this, but oh, I'm terribly sorry. How very rude of me. Councillor Simon Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Summing up, I think this is really, it's really a civil matter now. It's out with planning because there's no condition that gives us any locus to require the applicant to do this. And from listening to the discussion, that it is, it sits with Greater Anglia to hear the views, and they can set a condition when they lease that retail outlet to require the leaseholder to provide a public toilet facilities. It's absolutely straightforward. It's within their power to do that if they are so minded. And I think that's really the most likely route where we're going to get public toilet facilities on this station. But as I say, when this comes back, we just focus on the condition and the terms of that condition, and we determine that application on its merits. And the toilet matter is a civil matter. Thank you.
Councillor Smith sums it up in exactly the way I would have wanted to if I'd thought of it. I'm not proposing to come back to members again. I'm sorry, we've come to the end of our time, and I just want to give Elliot a few moments and his colleagues to respond to what has been said, if they wish.
Thank you. Yeah, no, really do take on board the comments raised, and that's what the purpose of being here. You know, we came here to listen to you, to tell you the update. You know, as well, we have engaged with the CPPF and TRA, so we're not trying to shy away from the situation. So we do appreciate the comments and passed on. Unfortunately, some things won't be possible, but that doesn't mean that some things we can't take away. And I think we'll have a detailed discussion with GA around the kind of, you know, try to pass on the comments what have received, the feeling from councillors and potential local members around, you know, the encouragement for a public facility. But I suppose that's within the only thing we can do within our power, but we will take on board the comments and speak to GA. Sanjay, I don't know if you've got anything, or Joe, to add.
Anything more to add?
Everything.
Right.
Nothing from me, thanks.
Let's draw this session to an end then. Thank you all three of you very much for coming along and giving us this presentation, for putting up with our, perhaps in places, rather irate response. You have got the message about the strength of feeling, both from the community and from this committee. But as Councillor Smith says, that will not affect our consideration when it comes to the next stage of the application. But if GA and Network Rail together are able to find some solution to this, what ought to be a very small problem, then I know that would be appreciated by committee members and others. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, committee, our next item is Philippa Kelly will be taking us through the proposed response to the current government consultation on planning committees. It's now 12:05, or 3 minutes past 10, according to your choice of clock. Would you feel we can get through this in the time before lunch at, say, or breaking for, say, 1 o'clock?
I'm very confident we can do this swiftly.
Right. I hope your confidence is justified. Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
It's the declaration of interest that I omitted to mention before the AstraZeneca pre-app, that I am a shareholder, but I'm not predetermined.
Thank you for that. So let's go straight into the next item, which is, of course, item 3 on our agendas. Thank you very much for attending. So, Philippa.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So the report can be found on page 5 of the hard copy of the agenda. This is agenda item 3. Members, you should all by now be aware that at the end of May this year, the government published a consultation paper on proposed reforms to planning committees. That consultation seeks views on the implementation of 3 aspects of reform proposed to modernise planning committees. And those reforms focus on the delegation of planning functions, the size and composition of planning committees, and mandatory training for planning committee members. And the changes which are being proposed in the consultation aim to bring greater consistency, efficiency and professional rigour to the way that planning committees operate. They follow the introduction of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, the government's delivery vehicle for the 1.5 million new homes target during the 5-year parliamentary period, which is currently going through the House of Lords. The consultation paper and an officer's summary of the measures proposed by government was initially shared with all planning committee members across the 2 councils, inviting their comments, and this was then widened to include all members of the councils. It's worthy of note that the proposed national scheme of delegation aligns mainly with the council's own scheme of delegation, which was approved at full councils in May of this year. However, our responses in the report before you do set out a preference for including a mechanism for call-in, which we have in our own scheme of delegation, where material planning issues are identified by objectors or where it is felt the proposal would benefit from public scrutiny. And this is to ensure that planning continues to be seen as part of the democratic process, to ensure residents and communities have the opportunity to be involved in the decision-making process. And as will be noted within the report, the consultation invites responses to 20 questions, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all members who took the time to respond, and from this committee in particular, Councillor Porrer, by providing detailed comments. The responses provided by all members have been woven into the responses set out in the report. By way of update, the report was agreed at South Cambs Planning Committee earlier in the month on the 9th of July, subject to an amendment with regard to question 7. Question 7 relates to the proposed national scheme of delegation and something called Tier B applications, and the government describes this category as those applications which can be subject to delegation, subject to what they're calling a gateway test. We know it as referral to delegation panel. South Cambs Planning Committee agreed to remove the first bullet relating to RMAs on larger sites in the response to question 7, because these types of applications should automatically be referred to Planning Committee, as with our own scheme of delegation. So the recommendation today is within section 2 of the report. This is a report for noting. Officers recommend that the JDMC note the content of the report and authorise a formal response to be submitted on the basis of the suggested responses contained in this report. That is subject to the amendment as I've described in response to question 7 to remove the first bullet point. Question 7, the response to question 7, which can be found on paragraph 5.7 under the response, yes. It then goes on to say, however, the following should be included in the exemption list. We're taking out the first bullet, applications for reserved matters approval for larger sites, because they, in our view and in alignment with our scheme of delegation, should automatically go to Planning Committee. So I hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, I must admit I'm confused by that, because it seems to me that at the moment those should automatically go to Planning Committee, but are they not included within Tier A, which is applications that must always be delegated to officers? Is it not necessary to retain that?
My understanding it needs to stay on because they're proposing that all REM, irrespective of size, stays in Tier A if you read the first question. So
Perhaps to let Philippa clarify this. Do you see the point I was referring to?
Question 7 relates specifically to Tier B applications, Tier B development, which under the government's proposals are applications which can be delegated, but to go through this gateway test, which is a delegation panel for assessment. So
the question begs the question, why are applications for reserved matter approvals for larger sites, for example, 100 or more residential units, why are they not in Tier A?
that's what we're saying. They should be automatically referred to Planning Committee in accordance with our own scheme of delegation. So everything under section 7 relates to Tier B.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. That in the paper, they're referred to as Tier B, and we're saying no, they should be included in this list. It's so complicated, it's back to front, but these are reserved matters for large sites which would already have been considered by Planning Committee. So why is it not that this element should be in Tier A as automatically being referred to Planning Committee?
That's not Tier A.
If Philippa could answer that, that'd be really helpful.
Tier A relates to applications. Oh, I think I'm going to muddle myself if I'm going to have to call up the consultation response.
That's at 5.2.
I think, while Philippa's finding the relevant place, 4.2, Tier A applications are ones that must always be delegated to officers. not ones that must be considered by committee. That's a crucial difference.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Absolutely. Tier A are applications which are always delegated to officers. The list in the government's proposals is quite extensive and includes applications for planning permission for householder development, minor commercial development, minor residential development, as you'll see in the section above. So I do note that the terminology is confusing. It is not the council's terminology. This is the government's proposed terminology. What we're trying to do in our response is align it as closely as we can with our own approved scheme of delegation for planning committee. So I hope you'll trust us that in the final response, we will do that.
Thank you very much, Chair, for into questions. I wasn't able to stay for the discussion in South Cambs Planning Committee, so this is the first time I've looked at it. I'm a bit of a sort of split reaction to this. The substance of the text, much of which I agree with, but I'm very concerned about the fact that, for example, in question 2, we've just given a yes to should these things fall within Tier A. Now that is then caveated because, you know, we say subject to the following, and particularly in relation to question 5, we talk about call-in, which I think is good and I agree with, but I really worry that if we just answer yes, all they look at is the yes, and they will completely ignore the rest of it. So I'm not actually happy with us just answering yes to a lot of these questions, when actually our answer is not really yes.
We can certainly take that away to embed clarity. There's also a piece around responding in every response to, yes, this aligns with our own scheme of delegation, if that would help sort of reiterate that position and give you that comfort you're seeking.
Sorry, if I can come back, Chair. I mean, it depends on what the options are. I'm assuming that there is a consultation here and your answer can either be yes, no. Frankly, if it's a yes or a no, and we're putting a caveat, I would say no with the caveat, not yes with a caveat, because I think the government will just see yes, put that in a spreadsheet as a yes, and ignore it, and ignore the rest of it.
Councillor Porra.
So I do send a long thing to this, and officers have incorporated loads of it, and I'm really grateful. But I absolutely agree with Councillor Williams. I think when this is put in a spreadsheet for the civil servants to look at, they'll just go along the line. So for question 4, which is 5.4, question 9, which is 5.9, can we add in the caveat again, subject to a call-in mechanism for Tier A? Because otherwise they will just read that line and go, yeah, Cambridge are fine with that. Not, yes, we need to refer back to question 2. Because this is my real concern. And I think you've made this very, because officers will be left incredibly vulnerable. We have some very forthright residents, as we know. We deal with them at committee. We stand, possibly stupidly, but we do, for election to get that. It is completely unacceptable that a Tier A could never be called in, because it will leave the officers exposed to a huge amount of emails and no public forum and no right of reply. I also had a couple of other comments, if that's useful. 5.7, yeah, I think, again, we need to reiterate the call-in thing, because, again, it's one of those ones where we put yes, but it should, I would rather it would be no, but only if you do a call-in. 5.14, we talk about the minimum number of people on committees. I think that is different from the quorum, because we've answered, yes, we need a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 12. Whereas actually on City, we have 8, but it's a quorum of 3. So I think we just need to clarify, are we talking about a quorum of members or the minimum size of committee? My understanding is the 6 would be a minimum size of committee. And you could then set a quorum of 6 for 12 or 3 for 8 or whatever you want to do. Because at the moment, we seem to be answering as if it's a quorum. I think we don't mean that. The other thing, for the planning training, I support the idea of a national one. But could we put something in about having a 15-month life? Because my worry is if you get trained in June and then, you know, you have your election, and particularly for those of us with care commitments, we put in the thing about having it online and available, but it would make sense for that licence for the year to run for, say, 15 months, so we've got that kind of overlap. And I think that could just come up in 5.15, for example. Yeah, and I agree about 5.16 when we look at how many are rejected. I did wonder if we should make reference to cost awards, because certainly having been involved in some quite prominent planning ones recently where I've gone to the appeal, whilst we rejected it, it was a legitimate rejection. The inspector disagreed with our reasons and the applicant had provided more information. So I don't think it's fair to say you've rejected 10%. I think, yeah, if you get costs awarded, fair dues, you've made a poor decision. But yeah, so I absolutely agree we need to leave it at 10%, and I agree with your argument. But I think that point as well is, having sat through some recently, the applicant will provide more information for the inspector. So when it goes to appeal, it's upheld, but had we had that information at first stage? Yeah, so those are my further comments. But I do absolutely agree we've got to keep reiterating the calling thing, because we cannot have a situation where we get Tier A with no possible calling.
Philippa, can those points be accommodated?
Yep, certainly. So I'll take on board turning around the responses to no and the caveats. I just want to ask a couple of questions in response, please. Just to confirm and reassure you all, I understand from the consultation that it would be annual training. So, but I will reiterate the preference for, you know,
just so once you've had your annual training, it covers you for 15 months. So we don't have a situation where we haven't got a planning committee because some people can't have gone to training in the 2 weeks in June they're offering it.
And I believe that I've picked up all the other comments. So, thank you.
Councillor Stobart.
Just points of detail, Chair, from my reading. An assurance that the second paragraph under item 5.9, so that's in relation to question 9, does appear to be at variance with the answer under 5.7. So I may be missing something, but I just wanted to point out that at first reading that does appear to be. So the second paragraph, top of page, well, second paragraph down on page 13, does seem to be at variance with what is said in item 5.7.
Right.
We will definitely have a look at that to ensure there is no, to ensure they're aligned.
Although it's quite outside of my kind of regular kind of expertise, the notion of controlling to a certain level of appeals being allowed is quite kind of open loop, difficult to manage. And I wonder how we could do that. So it's not concerned with the immediate response to this, but if we were targeting a specific level of appeals being allowed, it just feels like something we could dig into a bit more. And dare I say it, there's a bit of machine learning in here, I would have thought. But anyway, that's completely beside the point. It does seem to be a challenge that should be addressed on its merits and to achieve those objectives.
Councillor Braddon.
I'm going to admit, prepared to admit that I do not understand what 5.17 means. I'll just read it. The quality of decision making, the current threshold of what, I ask myself, is 10% for major and non-major applications. What does that mean? 10% what? 10% we've got to pass, or 10% we've got to fail, or 10% we don't look at? Or what does it mean, the 10%? That's why I didn't answer that. You know, I just didn't understand it. I don't know what they're asking. Could you explain that, Philippa?
It's a proportion of all planning applications determined.
What, failed? Or are we saying we accept that some of them that we decide we may get wrong, and at the moment, are we saying we accept, unwelcomely and reluctantly, but we accept that 10% we might make the wrong decision on? Or, I don't understand. Do you see what I mean?
Sorry, the government is asking, my understanding, that we are looking to target approvals of 90% for major and non-major, 95% approvals. So in our response, we're saying that targets don't necessarily reflect good decision-making, particularly with decisions that could be overturned at appeal. So we are concerned to change that threshold. Again, it's the wording that's been put to us in the question by the government that is confusing.
So the critical, thank you. So you're saying that this is saying we currently make around 90% approvals. It's not to do with pass or fail, it's approvals of planning applications that come to us. And they're suggesting we should actually up that to 95% approvals. But that's putting, if I may say so, the cart before the horse. It depends what you get in. Otherwise, what's the point of having a planning committee? You know, the whole point is that we examine and we look at the material issues, and obviously all the officers have done a load of work in advance. But if you're saying by default, not you, but the government is saying, we think you should increase your approvals rate to 95, that's, in my view, undermining the true function of the planning committee. So I agree that I do not support this increasing of the threshold to 95%. I think 90 is reasonable. I don't know if that's reflected in the answer.
If I can come back, that is absolutely what we're saying in our detailed response under that particular question.
And that's what I sort of understood, but I'm glad to clarify what you're saying.
I was simply going to say that I think Councillor Brandon may have misunderstood. As far as I understand it, it is the percentage of decisions which were overturned on appeal, which is what you're considering. And so that if you, for instance, have 100 decisions and they are appealed and more than 1 out of 10, you lose the appeal. That is what they're checking about the quality of decision making. It's not the proportion of applications which are approved or refused or so on. And so it's, and I agree that 10% is reasonable. You don't know the context of in each area. So I'm happy with it, what was proposed, but I think there may have been a misunderstanding here.
You're right, it says the quality of decision making is one that has 10% or more of either its major or non-major decisions overturned at appeal. So it's how we perform compared to the appeal data, isn't it?
Well, either way, it sounds as though question 17 wasn't particularly well worded in the consultation. So I think I agree that you need to answer it as if, so you're covering both aspects. One thing that did both the number that we reject and the number that go to appeal and then either fail or are passed. So what I was just going to mention, it's a point that Councillor Thornborough has mentioned to me, that one of the things that we have, I think it's reduced, but the problem we have when we get applications, planning applications that are incomplete or incomplete. And what we don't want is to encourage that. We want to encourage the opposite. That's where pre-application work is very important, but I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. It did occur to me, just as Councillor Grothup was saying that there's a presumption that it's the planning service that's at fault, right? And it's not the case, because if we have a maverick applicant and they don't engage in pre-planning performance agreements and they ignore the advice and direction of the officers, and the officers are almost obliged to bring a really duff application in front of us, then we should reject it. We should refuse it if it's not up to standard. So I think that's weakening our hand as a local planning authority to have these targets, and it's going to encourage developers to come in with poor, ill-considered planning applications, and the results of poor development will be with us for generations. And I think we should really send that message back to government that that is not the right approach for good placemaking and sustainable development.
Sorry, this is unfair. Whether Councillor Hawkins wants to comment at this stage? No. then just to say for myself, I don't need to add much to the comments that have already been made. I think, from my point of view, there are a number of concerns, but the key issue is the statement that applications must always, under Tier A, must always be delegated to officers. And that causes particular problems for us. And I think Councillor Porra made the point very strongly about the benefits of democracy. This is to some extent a denial of democracy because these are the sort of applications which many people will approach us about. It won't be the 1,000 new houses. Many people will be concerned about the development which affects their immediate area. And to find that they are not able to get this called into committee so that they can make representations and so on, would seem undemocratic. And indeed, it is tempting to me to ask the planning minister to talk to the local government minister about his views of the important role of what he says are wrongly referred to as backbench councillors, often those on these committees. But perhaps that's not something we can incorporate in our response. But government needs to be consistent in recognising the importance of that. Members, I think we've had a very good discussion. I know Philippa has been able to take account of many of those points, and they'll no doubt be reflected in the response. Councillor Braddon, I'm not keen to extend the conversation if we can avoid it, but please come back.
Just to clarify, given that this has been through both City and South Cambs planning committees already, is Philippa going to be able to take into account the comments that Councillor Porra has made about yes, subject to call-in on the various points that she...
If I could just clarify, it's been to South Cambs Planning Committee where it's been endorsed and noted, but it's not been taken to the City Planning Committee because the timings won't allow, but I believe it will be, the Chair and Vice Chair of that committee will be asked to endorse the final version before submission. I'm of the view that in the recommendation, noting that we're asking for members to note the content of the report with the formal response to be submitted on the basis of the suggested response, I believe there is flexibility within that to enable officers to address the points that have been raised today and to update the response accordingly.
Right.
Very briefly, I just wanted to comment that Britain is the only country in Europe where we have this level of democracy in the decision of planning decisions. In most rest of Europe, it's decided on the plan, full stop, and that's it, either passes or doesn't. This is one of our great assets in terms of democracy. And I should be wary, and I think it's worth mentioning, that this may be reducing one of the key elements of our planning system, which is very much admired.